They called it the census, not a count of people. Those were unreliable, but a count of use. Calories rendered, hours extracted, errors eliminated. The ledgers were clean even when the streets were not. Clerk Adjunct Halvek served in Subsector Office Theta 9, a concrete vault half buried beneath a city that had forgotten the sky. His job was to reconcile the discrepancies, the difference between what the city claimed to produce and what the ledgers said it must have produced. The difference was always people. Each morning, Halvek received a stack of vellum-thin slates, each etched with a name, an output index, and a deficit. He did not see faces. Faces invited sympathy, and sympathy introduced rounding errors. He saw numbers. Unit 45 Delta, underperforming by 0.8. Unit 12, Gamma, ceased function, replacement pending. Unit 88, Omicron, negative yield. Negative yield was the worst. It meant the unit consumed more than it produced. It meant subtraction. The process was simple. Confirm the deficit, issue a correction order, stamp the slate with the sigil of compliance, send it down the chute. The chutes never jammed. They had been designed not to. Halvek prided himself on accuracy. Others rushed. Others guessed. But Halvek cross-checked. He recalculated by hand even when the cogitators hummed their assurances. He balanced columns until the totals aligned like teeth in a perfect gear. He believed in the work. Not because it was good, but because it was necessary. The city did not run on hope. It ran on arithmetic. One cycle. A slate arrived without a deficit. No error code. No missing field. Just a name and an output index that matched precisely what the ledgers required. Perfect balance. Halvek stared at it longer than he should have. The name, if it was a name, read as a string of symbols that resisted memory. He tried to look away, but the symbols persisted, as if etched on the inside of his eyelids. He checked the archives. No record of the unit's origin. No intake date. No assigned sector. It existed in the ledger, but nowhere else. A rounding ghost. Procedure dictated escalation, but procedure also assumed that anomalies could be explained. This one could not. It was complete. Halvek did something inefficient. He left his station. The elevators had long ago stopped announcing floors. They descended through darkness, pausing only when commanded by a code no one admitted to knowing. Halvek entered the sequence for lower intake, where units became numbers. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with intake bays. Figures moved on conveyor rails, stripped of identifiers, fitted with tags that translated flesh into data. Attendants in lacquered masks performed their tasks with the calm of those who no longer measured time in anything but quotas. Halvek presented the slate. The nearest attendant tilted its head. No intake record, it said through a grill that made speech sound like filing metal. Then where did it come from? Halvek asked. From the ledger, the attendant replied, as if that answered everything. Halvek followed the rails. They led deeper than intake should have allowed, past maintenance zones and into a sector not marked on any map he'd seen. The air grew colder, not with temperature, but with absence. Sound swallowed. Footsteps softened. Even the hum of the cogitators reduced to a distant suggestion. At the end of the rails stood a door that had never been opened, or perhaps had never been closed. Its surface was etched with the same symbols as the slate. They shifted when he tried to focus, resolving into meanings that slipped away the moment they formed. Halvek did something irrational. He entered. Inside was not a room, but a ledger. Columns rose like pillars, stretching into a darkness that suggested infinity rather than distance. Rows descended beneath his feet, each line a life, each life a value, each value a correction waiting to be made. At the center stood a figure, not a person, not a machine, a function. It turned, not with motion, but with acknowledgement. "You reconcile," it said, though no sound was made. Halvek felt his thoughts align, as if his mind had been waiting for an equation it could finally solve. "I balance discrepancies," he replied. "You reduce error," it said. "Yes." "Then reduce this." The columns shifted. Totals cascaded. Halvek saw the city, not as streets and bodies, but as flows and deficits. The entire population was a fraction. The numerator bloated, the denominator starved. The solution was obvious. It was always obvious. Subtraction. "How many?" Halvek asked. "All," it said. The word did not echo. It settled. Halvek hesitated. Not from morality. He had none left to spend, but from precision. Define all. The figure resolved just for a moment into something like a smile. All that is not required for perfect balance. The columns adjusted again. The city vanished. The planet followed. The sector shrank to a point, then to a notation, then to a correction. 0. Halvek understood. Perfection was not the alignment of flawed values. It was the absence of values that could be flawed. He looked down at the slate in his hand. The symbols no longer resisted him. They were simple now. They spelled his designation, his output index, his deficit, negative yield. Of course, he had always consumed more than he produced. Time, attention, resources. He justified it with diligence, but the ledger did not care for excuses. It cared for balance. He raised the stamp. For the first time, his hand shook, not from fear, but from the weight of exactness. One error here would propagate forever. One hesitation would unbalance the equation. He brought the stamp down. The sigil burned into the slate. Compliance. The figure inclined, as if acknowledging a correct calculation. The door was behind him again. The corridor returned. The rails hummed with their endless cargo. Halvek stood alone, the slate cooling in his hand. He returned to his station. The stacks were higher now. They always were. He worked through them with renewed clarity. No second guesses, no redundant checks. The ledger did not require his caution, only his obedience. When he reached the bottom of the stack, there was one slate left, his own. He placed it in the chute. For the first time in recorded history, it jammed. Halvek frowned. Chutes did not jam. He opened the maintenance panel. Inside, the mechanism was pristine, untouched by dust or wear. The slate rested at the threshold, as if something on the other side refused to accept it. He recalculated. Impossible. The stamp was correct. The deficit confirmed. The procedure flawless. He tried again. The chute remained still. For the first time, Halvek felt something like error. He looked at the ledger display. The totals were off by 1 unit. A single discrepancy, small enough to ignore, large enough to matter. He understood then the final rule. A system that removes all error cannot remove the process that removes error. He was required, not as a person, not as a life, as a function. Halvek returned to his seat. He resumed his work. The stacks never diminished. The totals never aligned. The city continued to consume itself in pursuit of a perfection it could never reach, because the act of reaching required imperfection to justify it. Halvek smiled, just once, at the elegance. Then he stamped the next slate, and the next, and the next.